Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 77 of How Do You Write? I'm Rachael Herron, and I'm so glad you're here today. This is a really fun, very different episode. Today I'm talking to Alex Courcier, who was introduced to me by my friend Beverly Williams, who is a professor and has been teaching him. And he was reaching out for an informational interview, and I flip flopped on him, and I said, yes, I will absolutely give that to you, but why don't we do it on air? Because he wanted to talk specifically about writing and podcasting. So you get to listen to this young man talk to me about writing, and he is awesome. He is going to set the world on fire, and I am very glad that I've already claimed him as a friend because I wanted to. And it was just an utter delight to talk to him. So you will enjoy that. In what's going on around here, you guys, I finished the third revision of the thriller, and I am so happy. I was sitting in a deeply, deeply soulless Panera while I was waiting for my car to get work done in a soulless town over the hill from where I live. And I could not have predicted that I could have felt so much joy inside a Panera when I came to the end of it. I actually kind of wanted to cry at one of the parts, which is unlike me. I don't cry much anyway. So that was awesome. And I was shocked and gasped at one part at the end because in one of the revisions, apparently I had changed the ending and completely forgotten that I'd done that. So it worked. It shocked me and scared me. And I just had such a good time finishing it. Oh, it's off my desk. So that's great. It's out to my agent. Fingers crossed that this time she thinks it's good enough to take out. I do not need it to be good enough to be published right now. I just want to sell it to an editor who can help me get it to the place where it will be good enough to be published. So I think it's at that selling point. I really do. I'm going to hold my confidence in that, even though sometimes that confidence is hard won. But that is great. I sent it out to a couple of reader friends too, who usually read for me, and I'm excited to hear back. And more news. We're heading into the second half of February. February is my music month in this replenish activity that I'm doing, writing this book on filling the creative spirit. And February is my music month. My band, Sausalito, hello Clara, my yacht rock band Sausalito is going along smashingly. Somehow we know like 18 songs and they sound good. Some of them, suck, but they're getting better. And some of them we could literally perform right now if we got a gig, which we're very close to doing. So that has been fun. March is coming up, and that's why I mention it. March is the month, take a deep breath, in which I'm planning to try to take vacation. And we've talked about this. I don't take vacation. I haven't taken vacation in years. The closest I got, I guess I took 1 week in Iceland couple years ago with my wife and did nothing. Nothing professional. But still, that was like traveling and being a tourist, and that's a lot of awesome, awesome work, but it's not relaxing. And so in March, I'm going to go to Barcelona for a week by myself, where I do plan to relax, and then a week with Lala, and then a couple weeks of vacation at home, staycation. And in order to do that for March, I'm trying to get everything off of my plate. So I've got the novel off my plate. I need to get a proposal out. I have an article for a magazine due. I have a Patreon essay to write. I have a bunch of podcasts to record, so you guys will not feel the difference of me being gone, unless I can't fill those podcasts, in which case you will just have to miss me, because I am really going to try hard not to work. I do have to teach a little tiny bit, but it's a pretty simple thing and it shouldn't take too much brain power. And the only other thing I'm going to do is write for myself in my journal. I'm going to write everything. I'm going to daydream. I'm going to imagine new books. I'm going to wander around. I have nothing on my plate. That is the goal. It is terrifying to me. And it is also super exciting to consider. So I hope that it works out. It is an incredibly privileged place to be sitting. I understand that. And I am grateful for the opportunity even to think about it. So that is fun. And otherwise, let's just jump into the interview because Alex is just such a delight. I hope that you Find him that as well. I know that you will. You couldn't possibly find him anything but a delight. It was just wonderful to talk to him. So I hope for you, my friend, that you are getting some writing done, that you are carving out a little bit of time in your day to get your words on the page, because that's what matters, right? I love that you listen to this show, but do let me be that boot in your ass that gets you moving toward your page, toward putting your truth into words. So happy listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Onward. Okay, well, listeners, I am so pleased to talk today to Alex Courcier. Hello, Alex.
Hello, all.
This is a unique and new kind of show. We're not going to follow the normal format for How Do You Write Today. Alex reached out to me for an informational interview, and I turned the tables on him completely, and I said, okay, how about you interview me on air, because he wanted to talk about writing and podcasting. And to be very honest with you, Alex, I didn't have a show lined up for this week, so you're going to be live in like 2 days, because
Awesome.
I have been finishing a book and putting stuff off of my table. So you are actually helping me a great deal today.
Sure.
Usually I give an introduction of my guests, and I would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are in your writer's journey. And where do you live,
Well,
and how did we connect?
okay. Well, for starters, I'm 21 years old. I have just actually switched over from writing with a degree in English with education concentration to writing concentration, because I felt that if I was going to go to college and pay, X amount of dollars a year, I want to go for what I want.
Yep.
I don't have anybody paying for me. I'm doing this by myself because I wanted this to be independent. So I decided if I'm going to go to college, I'm going to pay for what I want. So it was actually my creative writing class that really spurred me to become a writer. Where I am right now, I'm amateur at best. I only have a story published in the Westfield Voice, which is a local newspaper.
That's so
I'm a student.
fantastic.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting it was like, wow, I actually have something published. This is really cool. Like, I
Right.
really want to keep going with this. And I think the biggest point of what's inspired me to become a writer is, as I mentioned to you before, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen to a lot of horror podcasts and fiction podcasts. And I was amazed at the volume of writing that I couldn't find elsewhere, and the quality of that writing, and the quality of the recordings that people do, and just everything about it was so alluring to me, because I've always liked storytelling. I've always liked reading. I was the kid that would sit in the corner in the shade at recess and read a book instead of play kickball with everybody. But one of the biggest things for me was is when I started writing for my creative writing class. We did workshop, which I feel like everybody's done if they've been in a creative writing class. And getting the feedback from other people about what I've written and about how I can improve as a writer and all the things that I could do with it, I was so amazed. And when I actually wrote something that I was proud of, I was like, wow, I can do this. Because I've wanted to write since I was in high school. I tried to start a novel in high school, and I would get 1,000 or 2,000 words in like really quick bursts, like, yeah, I'm going to write it all right now. And then I would leave it for months, and I would go back and be like, I'm never going to touch this again.
Well, yep, that's a major problem in writing.
Yeah, it's definitely been my biggest problem.
So what genre would you lean toward then? Would you lean toward horror, or?
I think right now I'm leaning towards like horror and sci-fi and fantasy. I haven't really figured out what I'm best at or what I really want to do, but I know that I want to write fiction. That's the biggest thing for me.
Fantastic.
Because I find a lot of satisfaction, a lot of enjoyment in writing something, and then somebody telling me after they've read it, like, wow, I really like this. Like,
Yeah.
this is cool. You're going to do more with this. And like, I can actually do that.
It also sounds like you are receptive to criticism, which is something that a lot of writers have a very hard time with in something like a workshop. If somebody tells them how to fix their work or how to change their work or their opinions about their work, a lot of writers will shut down and kind of go back into their carapace and crawl into the cave. Do you have any of that reaction, or do you just embrace it?
I think that was me at the beginning, but what happened was is I've worked in the service industry my whole life. I've worked in restaurants, and I've worked in jobs where I'm not independent. I was a painter when I was young, and now I work in restaurants, I work in food carts, I work in the back of kitchens, I work in the front. I've done it all, and I know how people are, but I also know how to take criticism, because if you've ever worked with Dunkin' Donuts, you know that people aren't exactly nice at 5 in the morning before their coffee. And if you shut down, you get fired.
What a great thing to say. And honestly, all of the successful writers I know, as close friends, we were all in the service industry. All of us. I was a waitress for years and years and years. And you're right, you just have to shut up and take it with a smile, which is what we do in criticism of our work too. If it's a review, we shut up and take it with a smile, period. We do not react. But if we're in a workshop, you shut up, take it with a smile, and then take it away and reflect upon it and decide whether their criticism is something that is meant to help you or something you could just say, no, 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 not for me. You're just wrong about this. I think the problem is a lot of new writers go, oh God, everybody is right, but everybody's telling them different things that contradict each other. So that's so cool. Well, I love to hear where you are. I know that you're interested in podcasting and you have a brilliant voice for it.
I appreciate it.
So you should absolutely do this. So now the weird thing about this particular episode is that you're kind of going to interview me, right?
Tables have turned.
I like them.
Well, the biggest thing, like, I remember I was listening to a podcast a while ago, and somebody said, it was a question that I thought was really important as a writer to be asked, and it's something that I can't answer yet, but I know that you can. When was the first time that somebody asked you, what do you do, that you were able to say, I'm a writer? When was the first time when you thought to yourself, like, oh, well, I'm a writer?
That's a great question. It was years ago, probably 15 years ago. So it was after my master's, but it was well before I had completed a novel, well before I felt comfortable calling myself a writer at all. I was a 911 dispatcher who was trying to be a writer on the side. And I was dating a woman who we were going to a dinner party, and I expressed this frustration to her. I said, someday I want to be able to say that I'm a writer. And she said to me, but you write, you're a writer. Call yourself a writer. If somebody asks you tonight at this party what you do, I want you to say you're a writer. And I thought she was crazy, but somebody did ask me at the dinner party, what do you do? And I said, I'm a writer. And I immediately caved and followed it with, and I'm a 911 dispatcher. And that's what I really do. That's how I pay the bills. But the interesting thing is that I was convinced that person would glom onto the 911 dispatch idea, because that's always something that people are interested in. And he didn't. He said, oh my God, you're a writer. How fascinating. Tell me about that. And I will never forget that moment. That was the very first time I said it and almost believed it. I think after that, I didn't quite feel comfortable with saying I was a writer until I had a completed book and was looking for an agent. At that point, I started to kind of whisper it a little bit more securely. You know, I'm a 911 dispatcher, but I'm also really a writer. I'm really trying to do this.
Well, I think that's actually fascinating, because the person who said to me was like, I didn't become a writer until I had, taken my writing as a job. Because that was one of the things, because a lot of people think, oh, like, hey, I can write because, like, oh, I only write when I'm inspired. And it's like, you're never gonna get anything done if you only write when you're inspired. Because how often do you feel that inspiration where you're like, I have to sit down and write this right now? I've felt that twice. Probably.
Yeah, me too.
More. I know, but it's not something that people are constantly like, oh, I'm inspired by this, and this. The world doesn't work that way. And I realized that. She said in the interviews, I finally was comfortable calling myself a writer when I was writing every day.
Yeah.
When I was taking it seriously, because she said it's not something that you just want to do. It's something that you have to do if you want to be successful at it. And
yes.
I was like, I was sitting there, and she's like, you're not a writer if you're not writing. And I was like, and she's like, as mean as that sounds to say, is like, and I was like, oh my God, like, you're right. Like, if I don't write, then I'll never be a writer.
But I always encourage students and anybody who listens to the show, if you are writing, even if you are not out for an agent, even if you're still working on your first book, even if you're not considering self-publishing or trad publishing yet, you get to say you're a writer if you're writing. And I extrapolate that even further. I have 23 books or so. I think that was my last count. But next year, if I'm not writing, if I were to suddenly stop writing, I wouldn't consider myself a writer personally, even though I will always have this backlist. But I really believe that writers write no matter where you are in your publishing career. So I consider you a writer. You are a writer. Do you feel confident taking those words and saying it?
I think I'll feel confident after the first, because like I've only really started writing consistently, like very consistently, in the last, I'd say, 5 months.
Okay, so Alex, we just met. What do you do?
I am a full-time day student at
wrong.
No?
No. Alex, we just met. What do you do?
I'm a writer.
Thank you. That's what it's hard. We're having this conversation face to face, and it's still hard for you to say. So
it is.
I'm just. If people are listening now in your car or driving to work, say it out loud. I am a writer. Awesome. Okay, great. Go on, Alex.
All right. Well, the next question: how long have you been a writer? When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I was about 5. or so. I learned, according to my mom, I learned to read when I was 3. Super passionate about writing even then, but it was around 5 or 6 when I realized that, my mom stayed home and cared for us. My dad got up in the morning and went to work because he had a job and that made money. And there were these things called jobs. And one of the jobs in the world, like remember Richard Scarry's The Busy Everybody Does Work
Yep.
book. I think somebody in there was a writer, and I realized, oh my God, that's a job. That's a profession. The books that I love to read, the books that I couldn't put down, somebody's job is to set those words down. And I remember thinking that must be the best job in the whole world, and that's what I wanted to do. But then I bought into society and familial pressure that, an artist does not pay the bills. Being a writer does not pay the bills. So I actually went to college at first for business and completely basically failed. I was like you. I put myself through undergrad and grad school, took out, loans to do it, and decided if I was going to take out loans, if I was going to do this, it would have to be something that I love. So then I switched to English and started to write. But it was a very long time before I actually kind of caught that glimmer that, yes, I could do this. If I worked hard enough, if I really wanted to, I could become that person who's behind the book. And I love being that person behind the book. I have to tell you, it's the best.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've always been so excited. I can't wait to finish the first book or the first collection of stories or whatever. Because like when I've published it, that's when I think I'll be able to say I'm a writer.
Yep. Have you ever?
Have
you ever done NaNoWriMo?
I have tried. I am really bad at because I remember I just listened to the episode where you were talking about it and that's how you wrote your first book.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would love to do it because I have friends in high school that did it. I have friends in high school who wrote the entire book in the month. And I was like, oh my God, how do you do that?
High school, and also you're like in classes at the same time. November's a busy school month.
Really is. But I remember I was so fascinated because I was like, I couldn't believe that my friends would write so much. I liked writing little stuff here and there. I liked, like adding to other people's stories, but I was never confident enough to write my own. Mm-hmm. And I tried NaNoWriMo. I tried it on the easiest setting, and I couldn't bring myself to sit down every day because I couldn't get comfortable with writing I couldn't get comfortable with writing bad words. And I was like, why should I be upset about this? I mean, every artist, or how should I phrase it? Every master at once was a beginner. And that resonated because I was like, that makes sense because no one just starts being amazing at something. Even prodigies never start amazing; they start good.
You have to write those. You have to write those shitty first drafts. You have to.
I've realized revision is my best friend because I write a shitty first draft and I go through it in revision and I'm just like, that sounds good. No, that sounds good. Oh my God, this actually isn't awful. I've got the bones here. I need to flesh it out.
Well, and I'm always thinking about the Susan Sontag quote that I quote everywhere. But she said, "What I write is smarter than I am because I can revise it," and it's such an interesting cognitive concept that we can write a sentence and then we read the sentence and then the person that wrote the sentence is reading the sentence and learning from that sentence and getting smarter about that sentence and then can fix it. Like it's these multi-layered levels of our brain in action, but we actually have to write the shitty first draft. And even now, 23 books in, my 24th book will be shitty when I write it the first time. You don't graduate to the person who then can write a good book. No, you never write a good book. You write a bad book and then you make it better. So if you already love revision, you said you're 21? Dude, you're set. That's a huge hurdle to get over.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think the reason that it resonates with me so well is because I've always liked fixing things. I've always liked making things look nice. Like when I was a kid, my mother owned a painting company when we were young. And I would be like 5 or 6, I'd be helping her clean up. I'd be helping her paint little walls here and there. I would roll stuff out. And I was like, this looks awesome. I did something that made something better today. And with my own writing, it's like, wow, I can actually make what I've written better just by going over it over and over and over.
Isn't that
and
neat?
Over again.
It's so cool.
It's taxing, and I'll admit it. And there's sometimes when I'm revising something when I'm just like, I hate this draft. I hate everything about it. I don't ever want to look at it again. Oh, but that sentence looks like I could do something with it.
And then the next day you get back and you look at the exact same thing and you're like, that is great. It's all about mood and it changes. So, yeah.
It really does. All right. Let's see. Next one was it? So, along with writing, so when did you decide that you wanted to do podcasting as well?
That was a crazy night that I couldn't sleep. I had just left my day
I've had
job.
those.
Yeah, I just left my day job. So this was about 2 years ago, and I still wasn't sleeping well because as a 911 dispatcher, I was up all night every night for 17 years, and so I would still get these nights where my brain would just start spinning and I'd get so into something, and I Googled how to start a podcast, and I realized that it sounded completely insane and impossible and technically difficult, and so then I started just poking in the internet, kind of seeing what was missing, what was the podcast I wanted to hear, and I don't think I would have started a podcast if I couldn't have found a niche, because there's so many podcasts filling great niches, but I'm a process junkie. I'm always looking for the magic bullet of writing that will someday make writing easy for me. It's never going to happen. I understand that. But I love, when you go hear a writer speak at, some concert hall, I would just kind of, I would listen as best I could. But as soon as somebody would ask the question, what's your process? Do you sit down in the morning? Do you have a cup of coffee? Do you write at night? I would really tune in because I would be listening for that. So I wanted to start a podcast about processes. I got up out of bed. And by the time my wife walked in my office the next morning, I had a name, a logo, an account with Libsyn. I had figured out how to use Audacity. I had a theme song. I'd gone into, Creative Commons music, and I'd just been up all night doing this podcast. So I had it the next week, and it wasn't something I hadn't been sitting around for years thinking I want a podcast. It was an overnight feeling, but I have to say that it has changed my life. I love doing it. This brings in no financial, gain or monies or anything like that, except I do plug my Patreon on it often. But actually the connection with people like you brings me so much joy, and that kind of networking, and networking is a dirty word, I think, in a way, but that kind of connection to writers all over the world is something that cannot be beat. And you and I are going to be friends forever now, and we're going to have that connection. And that's so cool to me. Like, podcasting is the best. And then you've heard the Pedal to the Metal, which I do with Jay Thorne.
Yep, I love the podcast so much.
I love that podcast.
Fun.
I love talking to Jay. He and I are so much alike in so many ways and different in others. And to have that camaraderie on air, and I admit things to him sometimes on air that later I wish I hadn't, because I literally forget that we're not alone. It feels like we're alone. It feels like I'm alone with you right now. But, I'm going to push this out on Friday and we will not be alone. But that's kind of the magic of podcasting, is this intimate connection. So.
Yeah. I think, it's funny. One of the podcasts that I've been because it was, as for the class this interview is actually a requirement for, is for Professor Williams' class, is career. Yeah, wow. Get a little tongue-tied sometimes. It's a career prep class for writers.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
Which when I was told about that, I was like, oh my God, there's a class for that? But one of them is a 9-week project, and I've wanted to start a podcast since I started listening to podcasts, because I have a friend, and him and his girlfriend have she's got this whole story written out, and she wanted me to do some of the voice acting for it, and I was like, this is going to be amazing.
Cool.
And we were getting ready to start for it, but life happens and it hasn't started yet. But I was thinking, I could do another podcast anyway, because I think about it. I'm a college student. I'm 21 years old. Getting my writing out in the world, aside from places like Tumblr and WordPress or on blogs or on smaller social media sites, is about all I have right now. Submitting to larger journals is a lot more difficult, as one of my professors calls them, the big boy journals. It's very hard. Well, it makes sense, because you can submit to your college journal, or college the work thing, and that's cool. But those aren't giant accredited journals that go out to half the country, or that are sponsored by other universities and other companies. And I remembered, I was like, well, what if there was a place for people my age, people in college who've just started, people in high school who've just started writing, that want to start getting some exposure for their writing? I was like, I could create a podcast where I, have somebody's story read on the podcast, and I interview them and talk to them about writing, about what they want to do with it.
I love this idea.
Get exposure for people who don't have a way of getting it. And I thought that really cool, because I can imagine, if there was a podcast out there for that, I'd do it for myself.
Absolutely. I love that idea. It's creative and it's unique. I have not seen anything like that.
Really?
I really haven't. And I do cruise the podcast airwaves quite frequently. Have you seen anything like that?
I don't think so, no, but I usually keep more to the fiction and storytelling kind of at sides of the podcast. But as far as I've seen, I haven't seen anything like that yet.
That is really, really cool. And I will recommend, you can have, the problem with podcasts is they do become something you start collecting. I was just on a podcast yesterday, the Hybrid Authors podcast, and Brian Williamson on that. He has 5 podcasts. I think Jay has 3. I've whittled down to 2. So, but what I'm saying is that you can have as many as you want. Do it. Do it.
I know, I'm excited about it. But that's one of the things. Like I think because like when I got the email telling me that like, hey, like this person has written all these books and she has podcasts. I was like, you can do both. I immediately thought I was like, oh my god, you can have both. And I was like, as of right now, you're where you are like with your career, like being able to be having all these work exposure, having these podcasts. You're where I want to be right now. As a 21-year-old college student, what you're doing right now is what I want to do.
I want you to do it. It's pretty
I want to do
freaking awesome too. I have to say, love it.
I'm a little jealous.
I appreciate that. I don't ever feel jealousy unless it's something super awesome. So I want this for you, and I can see it that you're gonna get it. So I love that Beverly connected us. This is so Beverly.
I'm very thankful.
Beverly and I have
She's
been
awesome.
friends for forever. She goes back to my knitting days. We're big knitters. So that's how we're even before writing. So what else you got for me?
All right. Well, I've got a few more questions. Let's see. So now I think I've already gotten the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask anyway because just from talking to you, I already know what you're going to say. But what's more important to you, enjoying your work or being able to support yourself with it?
Oh, that's actually a really hard question to answer. You really stumped me. I think honestly it's a 50-50 split. I do write things sometimes that I do not enjoy writing because I live in the Bay Area. We have a mortgage. It took a long time for me to be able to reach the level at which I could quit my one job and focus on just the single job. Because for 10 years I worked both jobs full time. And that was, 60 hours at the day job and 20 to 30 hours on the writing job. So being able to take care of myself in a way that keeps the roof over our heads is super, super important. But on the flip side, the enjoyment of what I do is paramount. As is, I love the freedom of writing. I love the freedom of this life. So those things are so important. I think to answer the question, it is important to me to enjoy what I'm writing as much as I can. Although I do sometimes do it as a day job. But the fact that I can is also so enjoyable that even the stuff that I'm not as excited to write, I can amp myself up about and fall in love with because I have the freedom to do it. Is that too nebulous an answer?
That is actually more or less what I expected to hear.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
It's because I feel like it's if anything. They say if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. But I know that's bullshit.
It is
because
bullshit.
even if you love what you do, you don't love everything about what you do.
I love every single day that I come to my desk, which is every day. But every single day there are some things like catching up on email or like I'm starting a new class at Berkeley next week and it's going to take me hours to set up the computer system to do it. And while I love teaching, I'm really not excited about setting up that computer system, but it's part of my job. And the fact that I get to walk 10 feet down from my kitchen and sit down here surrounded by dogs and do that, I will, even if it sounded like complaining, I will never complain about it because it's magnificent, It
does sound amazing. I'm like I said again, I'm jealous. I have 2 dogs at home, and while I'm away at college, I don't get to see them ever. And like one of them's a 165-pound Great Pyrenees, and the other one's a Pyrenees Chow mix who runs circles around everything, never calms down. But they are the sweetest dogs in the world. And I've always wanted dogs. I've had dogs more or less my whole life, and I always say like, as soon as I get an apartment, I'm getting a dog.
Yeah.
It's not negotiable. But I think that one of the reasons that I find this career choice this career path so enticing is that freedom. Because I don't like I've worked at restaurants. I've worked at the same restaurant for 4 years. I work at a place over the summer. I've worked it for 3 years. I am terrified of not commitment in the entirety of it, but commitment in the sense of I'm stuck in this place till further notice. Mm-hmm. I can't stand that. I want to be able to pick up and go where I want. I want to be able to experience life. I don't want to be stuck in my hometown my whole life.
Do you know the term digital nomad?
I do not.
Oh yeah, Google that, digital nomad. It's a thing. A lot of writers are digital nomads now. They don't have homes, but they do these things where they'll go stay in Tunisia for 6 months and write from there, and then they'll go to Thailand for a month or two. And when I was your age, the internet existed, but barely, you know. But now people really can. If I was not happily married, happily with home and 3 dogs and 2 cats, I would be one. There is no way I would have a home. I would just have my laptop because that's all I need. I need my laptop and my microphone to do this job. And I could go anywhere and stay anywhere. And you have that in front of you. You have that ability to do that. You can sometimes live cheaper in Thailand, cheaper, in, probably can't live cheaper in Bali, but I wish you could. But you could, you can do that. You can do that. And to have that ability, plus honestly, like experience in the service industry, which I've always fallen back on, you can go anywhere.
Exactly.
Well,
someone always needs a waiter.
Always.
A waiter or a waitress is always quitting somewhere.
Exactly.
And you can never blame them.
It is always in the back of my mind that, like, hard times, I'll just waitress. I'm 45 years old. It would be hard, but I would do it.
And the pay is pretty good.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, my brother's a bartender at a restaurant in our town, and on a good weekend he pulls $600-$700.
Holy crap!
Yeah. Well, I'm from Cape Cod.
Oh.
I'm from Falmouth. So, I mean, in the summer myself, I work 2 restaurant jobs. I work from 10 to 4 and from 4 to midnight, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
That's my summer. But it's funny because even with all that, because like the jobs that I have, they take a lot of my time. But even on the Sunday, it's like I do whatever I want. I'll go to the beach. I go for a walk. I go for a bike ride. I sit down and I write. Or my favorite thing is going to the beach with a book.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing too.
Sitting in my chair and reading a book for 6 hours, getting burned everywhere, but loving it. Because
have you ever read Anthony Bourdain's first memoir, Kitchen Confidential?
I don't think I did.
I think you should. He talks a lot about starting out in the service industry on the East Coast. I want to say Cape Cod area, and he's just such a brilliant writer. I think if you haven't read him, I think you'll really, really like him, especially since you're in that industry in the summers.
What's the name?
Anthony Bourdain, Bourdain, and I think the first book was called Kitchen Confidential, and it's just wackadoo and fun, and you will identify all of the drug-addled cooks and the dropped bagels on the floor that you brush off, and the drinking you start doing at 9 a.m. when you get off shift, all of that.
For us, usually it's the drunk customers and the coked out chefs.
The chefs are always coked out, dude. And if the chef does not show up, it's because he's in jail, but he'll be in on Monday.
Yeah, pretty much. We had a sous chef, we had a prep cook that would come in, and he had a thing where if he drank too much and if his alcohol levels went to a certain point, he'd have a seizure. Okay. And he let the owners of the restaurant know this when they hired him, and I think after the 3rd time he didn't come in because of it, they fired him. Because like, you can't be missing a Saturday night, when we're our busiest, just because you wanted to get drunk.
I love the restaurant industry.
Oh god, it's awful. I mean, I've worked just about every job you can in a restaurant aside from actual chef, because I don't like touching food.
Yeah.
I don't like having to make food because it's probably the most stressful thing in the world.
It's so stressful and it's so hot. Ugh.
I also work in a 4-star restaurant, so if I were to fuck the food up, that's $45 of the restaurant's money down the toilet and a possible walking out party. That's all on me.
I only worked at low level $15 plate kind of places, but yeah.
I lucked into this job. A friend of mine got a job dishwashing there, and when I was at my worst, which was actually when I was 18, I moved out of my parents' house. My mother and her boyfriend were great, but I didn't get along with her boyfriend because he's a Vietnam vet Marine. And I was 18 and secretly bisexual, so things didn't go that way.
Rough.
So yeah. I moved out, and after 6 months of living at a friend's house, his mother said, if you're going to college, you can stay here for a year, and we'll help get set up at a 4-year university because when you transfer. I was like, awesome. 6 months in, she wanted me to leave because she wanted her boyfriend to move in. If you know anything about the the Northeast, especially Cape Cod and Massachusetts, in 2015 we had the worst snowstorms we've had in a very long time.
I remember that.
I was homeless for 3 days during that because I couldn't find somewhere to live because I was too stubborn to call for help, and I was too stubborn to go back home.
I'm so sorry, but I just had the thought that those are great traits for a writer, though. You have to be stubborn as shit.
That's why I work as much as I do, because I know if I don't, then there's no one else to blame but me.
Yep. Oh, I love it. I love talking to you. What else you got for me?
All right, let's see. All right, that question's now redundant. Let's see. As a writer and podcaster, what's the most rewarding aspect of your job?
As a writer and a podcaster,
or individually?
And I think I have to do it individually. As a writer, the most rewarding parts of my job, there are a few. There are coming up with the idea for the book, because before you write a book, the book is perfect and you know it and you can feel it and you have the atmosphere and you know exactly how it's going to move your readers. So having the idea and building that idea, working on the premise, the synopsis, all of that to me is really fascinating and delicious. And then I screw it up, and the book you end up with is never the book you wanted. It is always better than the book you wanted, but it's always different. So that's always an interesting and pleasant surprise. I love writing the end. I love writing the end on first drafts, and I really love it on revisions. I actually did it yesterday. I finally finished the gosh darn third revision of the thriller and sent it to my agent. I know. I was in a Panera. Panera has never been more glamorous. That is a soulless place. But I had
a Dunkin' Donuts up here.
It's the worst. It's the worst. But I was there and I was so happy. So doing that, and then also the connections with readers is completely separate from the writing process. But when I do get email from readers that say, you helped me through either a difficult situation, you helped me when my husband was in the hospital and I couldn't sleep and I read your book, or you helped me learn this about X. There is nothing better than that. And I think that translates back into the podcasting, that it comes to the connection. And I mean, as humans, we're all trying to avoid suffering and find love, right? So every single one, even the people we hate the most, are trying to avoid suffering and find love. So when we make those connections with human beings that we speak the same language, and I'm not talking about English, you have people that you meet that speak English the same way you do, but you can't talk to them easily. And, before I met you 30 minutes ago, I didn't know if we would speak the same language, but we do. And having that kind of heart connection is the best thing about the podcast. The best thing. The worst thing about the podcast is listening to your own voice is really just... Yep. It just grates on you, Every
recording I've ever done, I can't stand the sound of my own voice.
And then I would be on podcasts before I started one. I would guest on them, and I could never listen to them. And now I have to listen to them because I'm also the editor. So that's no fun. But again, it's the no fun part of the best job ever. So it doesn't suck.
Every job has aspects you don't like. It's funny that you mentioned, that heart-to-heart connection, because it is Valentine's Day.
Oh, it is! Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you as well. But it's funny. It's a little random, off-the-cuff kind of thing, but it's Valentine's Day, but it's also Lent, which is kind of funny. I think it's hilarious. I think I'm putting that in. I've already got that saved to my
awesome.
my writing notes. I'm putting that in a story someday. It's Valentine's Day, but it's Lent.
That's wonderful. That is a story prompt right there. For sure.
Oh, I know. All right.
Let's start to wind it up, because I don't want it to be too long. But if you have more questions, we can go off air. So why don't you give me one more on-air question?
All right. So this is going to be the most cliche question I'll ask, but what advice do you have for an upstart in both fields?
Okay. So for an upstart, I think you're already on the money when it comes to writing. You already understand that you don't wait for the muse. That I think it was Thoreau, but I might be getting this wrong, who said, I always wait for the muse to start writing. Luckily, she shows up every morning at 9 a.m. Because you go to your desk and you start writing. The muse is the writing itself. If you can force yourself to get to the keyboard and move your fingers in any way, shape, or form inside a document, the muse will come. You don't wait for her. It's just a job. I don't subscribe to anymore the whole idea that you have to write every day. I used to really punish people with that idea until a friend of mine actually on the podcast said that's really opened my eyes. She said that's damaging for people who are writers who can't write every day, either because of life circumstances, because of work, because of kids, because of travel. Some people just can't. But what I do push is that you write every day that you can, every day that you have the time. I also believe that the best advice is to write, unless you absolutely can't, but is to write first thing in the day. If writing is the most important thing to you to get done in your heart, if that's what you really want to do, then get it over with. And you spend 20, 30 minutes writing, you get 500, 700 words, then no matter what happens the rest of the day, no matter how much you screw it up, you have achieved the one thing that matters to you the most. So get it over with as early as possible, and then add more words later if you can, if you want to. That's my advice for new writers, for new podcasters. Oh, I have good advice. This just came to me. Just be as ballsy as you can. I have gotten so far with ignoring that little voice inside me that says, "Oh, don't email that person. She's so big. She would never talk to you. She would never. She doesn't have time. She wouldn't stoop to answering this email, to being on the show." Be big and brave and ask. There's Amanda Palmer, for all her faults, which are probably not that many. But do you know Amanda Palmer?
I can't say I do.
She's a musician. She was in the Dresden Dolls. She's pretty famous for being a very avant-garde musician. She's married to Neil Gaiman, and she wrote this book called something about asking and yes. I'm sorry, I can't get the title, but the whole premise of the book, it's wonderful, is just ask, and the worst thing you can get is a no. But in podcasting especially, just ask, and you never know what'll happen. Like, you asked to interview me, and now we're pals and we're talking on the show, and you're going nationwide on Friday. So
that's exciting
because you asked, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things actually. Last year, are you familiar with a podcast called the No Sleep Podcast?
No, it sounds what a great title.
It's a horror podcast that originally started as one guy from Canada who would read stories from a Reddit forum called No Sleep, and now they're in their 10th season.
Oh my gosh!
And they have a cast of like 12 or 13 voice actors, and they have every week they release like a 3 or 4 hour show.
Holy crap! Wow.
Now it's like they have a show they release every week. It's like an hour and a half long. If there is a paywall, but it's $20 a season, which is nothing for like 28 episodes that are all 4 hours long. It's fantastic. And I went to see one of their podcasts live with my best friend, and I got to meet every single member of their cast that was there, which was like, I think at the time was 8 or 9 people. I mean, I have pictures of them. I have signed postcards. Like, I have everything. And I remember I talked to the guy who started, a guy named David Cummings, and he told me that, you know, because I asked him, I was like, well, I really want to start a podcast. Like, how did you start? He's like, I just kind of went for it. And I realized, I was like, it's what everybody tells me. It's like, if you don't, like, it's funny. I'll quote, you know, the Massachusetts State Lottery's motto: "You can't win if you don't play." And I figured you have to go for it, because the worst thing somebody can say is no. You get rejection. Big deal. Move on to the next one.
I will say that, like, I try way more things than I actually succeed at. I'm very people listen to me regularly know that I fail all the time. I'm constantly landing on my face. But I'm also very comfortable at getting myself back up and cleaning off the blood and strapping a pack of frozen peas to my thigh and just going on and trying the next thing and hurling myself at it. And asking for yeses, asking for forgiveness when I screw up, because I screw up so often, but just keeping pushing forward. And I see that fire in you, and I have to say that I'm expecting super things from you. And I'm not saying you must come up with an awesome novel in the next 6 months, but I'm saying as we progress and as we stay in touch, I'm really looking forward to see what you do, to what crazy things you attempt and fail and succeed in.
Well, I can't wait to have more stories to tell you next time we have this chat.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Don't hang up, but I will say goodbye to you officially online. Happy writing to you, and keep us all posted, okay?
I will, I promise.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
You're very welcome. Talk soon.